The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting a dull orange glow over the ruined city of Ashwood, a place that had once thrived with bustling streets and laughing children. Now, it was eerily silent, save for the occasional distant screech or the shuffle of feet on broken pavement. The air smelled of smoke, rot, and despair, an odor that clung to every building, every alleyway, and every survivor brave enough to remain. In a crumbling high-rise on the edge of town, Lieutenant Marcus Hayes crouched beside a shattered window, rifle in hand, scanning the streets below. His team, ragged and exhausted from days of constant vigilance, huddled behind overturned desks, whispering about rumors of a massive horde heading their way. Marcus's team was a collection of unlikely heroes, each with a story etched by survival. There was Lieutenant Tanya Alvarez, a former firefighter with the nerves of steel and hands that had saved more lives than she could count; Caleb Johnson, a sharp-eyed sniper who had once been a competitive marksman before life had forced him into this nightmare; and rookie Jordan Bell, a medic who had only joined their ranks a few weeks ago, still pale and trembling at the thought of seeing the dead walk. They all knew the stakes. The small warehouse they had fortified on the outskirts of the city was the last known human stronghold in Ashwood. Outside its walls lay a world overrun by the infected, by creatures that had once been neighbors, friends, even family. The first warning came in the form of a scream, shrill and desperate, echoing from the streets below. Marcus's pulse quickened as he pressed a finger to his lips, signaling the others to stay silent. Through the broken glass, he could see movement, shadows slipping between wrecked cars and abandoned buildings. At first, it was just one figure, then another, and another, until it became clear, a wave of zombies was moving with horrifying coordination. Their pale, bloodied faces glinted in the early light, eyes devoid of reason, mouths twisted into perpetual snarls. "We need to get the barricades up," Tanya whispered, her voice low but steady. "If they hit us here, there's no coming back." Caleb loaded his rifle with practiced ease, his jaw tight. "We can't let them breach the perimeter. If they do, everyone inside dies. No exceptions." Jordan gulped, clutching a first aid kit to his chest. "What if they come through the vents? Or the back doors?" His voice trembled. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, though his own stomach churned with fear. "We've planned for that. Stick to your positions. Stay sharp. And trust each other." The team scrambled into action. Barricades were reinforced with metal sheets, tables, and whatever debris they could find. Molotovs were readied, spikes were hammered into the ground, and watch posts were manned. Every noise outside, the clang of falling metal, the distant thud of a door being broken, made their hearts jump, reminding them how fragile their sanctuary truly was. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated only by distant moans and the occasional gunshot. Marcus and Caleb took shifts scanning the perimeter from the rooftop, scanning the horizon for any sign of larger hordes. It was during one of these scans that Marcus noticed something unusual. The zombies weren't moving randomly. They were forming a pattern, converging toward a single street that led directly to their warehouse. "They know where we are," Marcus muttered, dread settling like a weight in his chest. Tanya leaned over the ledge, her eyes narrowing. "They're smart, smarter than usual. Something's driving them, leading them right to us. We're going to be hit hard, and soon." As if to punctuate her words, a loud crash rang out from the street below. A vehicle had overturned, and the horde surged forward, faster than anyone anticipated. The humans scrambled to their positions, rifles raised, weapons trembling with anticipation and fear. Adrenaline surged through Marcus's veins, drowning the fear in a sharp, clear focus. He knew one thing: retreat wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. The first scream pierced the air, and the battle for Ashwood's last human refuge began. Molotovs exploded, flames licking at the edges of the street, while bullets tore through the shambling bodies that dared approach the barricades. Marcus's team fought as one, Tanya pulling survivors to safety, Caleb picking off threats before they could reach the walls, Jordan tending to the injured with hands that shook but refused to stop. Even in the chaos, there was a rhythm to their fight, a sense that somehow, against all odds, they might survive the night. But Marcus knew the truth, they were only scratching the surface. The horde was bigger, smarter, hungrier. And the battle for humanity's future had only just begun. Outside, the sun continued to rise, indifferent to the carnage below, as if the world itself was watching to see whether humankind could survive its darkest hour. By mid-morning, the warehouse had become a fortress under siege. Smoke curled from burning barricades, mixing with the acrid stench of decay that filled the streets of Ashwood. Marcus Hayes wiped sweat and grime from his brow, surveying the chaotic scene from the rooftop. Below, Tanya Alvarez coordinated the survivors, directing them to secure vulnerable exits while Caleb Johnson's sniper rounds cut down approaching zombies with unnerving precision. Jordan Bell moved from one injured fighter to another, his hands slick with blood, yet his resolve never wavered. Despite their efforts, the horde continued to press forward. It was larger than anything Marcus had seen before, hundreds, perhaps thousands, moving with relentless persistence. And yet, it wasn't mindless. They avoided traps, circumvented barricades, and funneled themselves toward specific points around the warehouse. Marcus frowned, realizing the implication: someone, or something, was leading them. The thought sent a chill down his spine. "Marcus, the south gate is compromised," Tanya shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. He spun to see the metal doors groaning under the weight of the infected, the first of the horde already slipping through. Without thinking, Marcus drew his sidearm and ran toward the breach, bullets and the screams of the dying echoing around him. He could see Caleb providing cover from the rooftop, his rifle singing death into the advancing creatures, each shot precise and deliberate. Jordan knelt beside a fallen survivor, tearing a strip of cloth to staunch a deep wound. "We can't hold them for long," he muttered, eyes wide with panic. "You hold them because you have to," Tanya replied sharply, grabbing a nearby crowbar and swinging it with brutal force at the nearest zombie. It fell with a sickening thud, but there were three more right behind it. Marcus reached the south gate, where the metal hinges had given way. With a grunt, he shoved the barricade into place, praying it would hold. The infected pressed against it like a living wave, moaning and scratching, desperate to get inside. His fingers went numb on the makeshift handle as the pressure built, each moment stretching into what felt like an eternity. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos, a guttural roar, deep and thunderous, unlike anything Marcus had encountered. Heads turned. The survivors froze. From the far end of the street emerged a towering figure, larger than any zombie they had faced, its movements unnervingly deliberate. Its eyes glowed faintly, almost intelligent, scanning the barricades as if calculating the weaknesses. That's not normal," Caleb muttered over the radio, voice tight with disbelief. "It's like it's leading them." Tanya tightened her grip on her crowbar. "Then it's our problem." The creature charged the barricade at the south gate, slamming against it with unimaginable force. Wood splintered. Metal bent. Marcus fired his pistol point blank, hitting it in the chest, but the creature barely flinched. Panic surged through him. He realized, with a cold certainty, that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a test of strategy, courage, and the unity of his team. "Fall back. Everyone, fall back to the inner courtyard," Marcus yelled, and the survivors scrambled, dragging the injured with them. Molotovs were thrown, creating walls of fire to slow the creature's advance. The horde behind it faltered momentarily, giving the humans a brief reprieve. Inside the courtyard, Marcus quickly called a meeting with Tanya, Caleb, and Jordan. Dust and sweat coated their faces, but the urgency in their eyes matched the urgency in his own. "We can't hold the gates forever," Marcus said bluntly. "We need a plan. That thing isn't like the others, it's directing them. If we don't neutralize it, it's only a matter of time before the walls are breached." Tanya nodded, wiping blood from her face. "We'll need traps, distractions, and precise shots. And someone will have to lure it, someone fast." Jordan swallowed hard. "You want me to do it?" "Not yet," Marcus replied, his voice grim. "We'll figure out who can handle it, but we don't have the luxury of guessing. This is the fight that decides if any of us see tomorrow." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the crumbling streets, the horde pressed closer. The humans worked with synchronized urgency, building traps, stacking debris, and readying weapons. Outside, the monstrous leader of the horde prowled like a predator, sensing the humans' every movement. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Every breath a gamble. And in the distance, Marcus could feel it, an ominous certainty that this was only the beginning. The battle for Ashwood's last human stronghold would demand bravery, sacrifice, and a level of teamwork none of them had ever known. One misstep, one moment of hesitation, and the horde would claim them all. As darkness threatened to fall on the city once more, the humans steeled themselves, knowing the night would test them like never before. Somewhere beyond the walls, the enemy waited, patient and cunning, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. And in that knowledge, Marcus felt a single, unyielding truth: survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about staying alive long enough to fight smarter. Night fell like a heavy curtain over Ashwood, the ruined city bathed in a grayish shadow that made every corner, every alley, seem alive. Inside the warehouse, Marcus Hayes and his team worked feverishly, setting traps and reinforcing barricades, each movement deliberate, every second precious. The monstrous figure they had glimpsed earlier, the alpha of the horde, was still out there, stalking the perimeter like a predator savoring its prey. Its presence gnawed at Marcus's mind. There was intelligence in its movements, a cruel cunning that made the humans' efforts seem fragile and temporary. Tanya Alvarez directed the survivors to form a secondary defensive line near the inner courtyard. "We can't let them breach the outer walls," she commanded, voice firm despite exhaustion. "If they get through, we lose everything." Her crowbar was already nicked and bloodied, and her knuckles bore the marks of relentless fighting, but her eyes burned with an unyielding resolve. Caleb Johnson had taken his sniper position on a nearby rooftop. The shadows hid him, and the faint gleam of his rifle caught the dim light as he scanned the streets for movement. He whispered into his radio, "They're circling again. That thing, it's coordinating them. It knows our weak points." Marcus clenched his fists. "Then we'll make them think we have no weak points." Jordan Bell, still trembling but determined, moved among the injured, bolstering morale and tending wounds. He glanced at Marcus. "How do we lure that thing into a trap without getting everyone killed?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "We create a corridor. Fire on one side, barricades on the other. It will follow, and Caleb takes the shot. Tanya and I will handle anyone that breaks through. Jordan, you stay inside with the injured, we can't risk losing you." The plan was dangerous, but it was the only chance they had. The team worked in tense silence, hearts pounding as the distant groans of the horde grew louder. Each noise outside, the scuff of a shoe, the snap of a branch, the wet thud of a body hitting the ground, heightened the tension. Hours passed as the trap took shape. Barricades funneled the infected toward a narrow street that led directly into a kill zone, lined with spikes and fire pits. Molotovs were stacked nearby, ready to turn the horde into an inferno if the Alpha fell into the path. Marcus watched from the rooftop alongside Caleb, his mind running scenarios over and over. They could not afford mistakes. Then, they came. The Alpha emerged first, its glowing eyes fixed on the warehouse like a predator assessing its quarry. Behind it, the horde followed in perfect synchronization, moving as if guided by an unseen hand. Marcus signaled Caleb, who raised his rifle, finger poised over the trigger. The Alpha roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them, and charged the corridor. Marcus felt his heart lurch as the massive creature collided with the first barricades, splintering wood and sending debris flying. The horde pressed behind, funneled into the trap. Spikes impaled the undead with a sickening crunch, while fire erupted from the Molotovs, turning the narrow street into a wall of orange and black flame. Screams filled the night, a chorus of the dam that echoed off ruined walls. Caleb's shots were precise, each bullet finding its mark in the Alpha's vulnerable spots, slowing its advance but not stopping it. Marcus and Tanya fought side by side at the edge of the firelit corridor, crowbars and rifles swinging, knocking back the few zombies that slipped past. Their synchronized movements were instinctual, a dance born of necessity and trust. Jordan, inside with the wounded, heard the chaos outside and felt a cold, sinking dread. But he gritted his teeth and focused, tending to a survivor whose leg had been crushed. "We can't stop now," he whispered. "Not when they've come this far." The Alpha faltered, massive arms thrashing in pain, smoke and flames licking at its body. With a final, coordinated effort, Caleb fired the critical shot, precisely between its eyes, and the beast collapsed in a heap, letting out a ghastly howl that reverberated through the streets. The horde hesitated, confused by the sudden loss of its leader, giving Marcus and his team the advantage. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire and the occasional moan of a survivor or dying zombie. Marcus lowered his weapon, chest heaving. They had survived, but only barely. The warehouse still stood, battered but intact, a fragile haven in a city of the dead. Tanya wiped soot from her face, looking at Marcus with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it, but they'll come back. And bigger next time." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready. This is only the beginning. If we survive tonight, we survive tomorrow, and every day after that is another fight. But we fight together. That's our strength." Jordan, still pale but steady, met their gaze. "Then we won't fail. Not as long as we stick together." Outside, the city remained silent once more, but the distant groans of the remaining undead reminded them that this victory was temporary. The battle for Ashwood's last human stronghold had been won, but the war for humanity's future was far from over. The victory over the Alpha had been hard-won, but it brought no real peace. As night settled over Ashwood once more, the survivors in the warehouse moved with quiet urgency. Fires still burned in the streets, casting flickering shadows across cracked walls and shattered glass. Marcus Hayes paced the rooftop, rifle slung across his back, scanning the distant horizon. Despite the silence, he felt the unease gnawing at him, an instinct sharpened by days of constant vigilance. The horde might have lost its leader, but the threat wasn't gone. If anything, they would return, smarter, hungrier, and more relentless. Tanya Alvarez was inspecting the barricades, checking for weaknesses, while Caleb Johnson recalibrated his rifle and scanned the surrounding rooftops. "They're regrouping," Caleb muttered, eyes narrowing in the darkness. "I can see movement on the far edges of the district. Smaller groups, but faster, more cautious." Marcus's jaw tightened. "They've learned from the Alpha. We can't just wait for them to attack head-on. They'll try to outflank us, sneak in where we least expect." Inside the warehouse, Jordan Bell checked on the injured, distributing clean water and rationing supplies. His hands shook slightly as he bandaged a wound on a survivor's arm. "Do you think we'll make it through the night?" he asked quietly. Tanya, crouched beside him, gave a small, tight smile. "We have to. That's all we can do." Hours passed, marked only by the occasional distant groan or the scraping of metal against debris. Then, the first subtle signs of danger appeared. A shadow flickered across the wall outside, and a series of soft, deliberate thuds echoed through the streets. Marcus motioned for silence. He crept to the edge of the rooftop, binoculars in hand. "Small groups, moving like they're hunting," he said grimly. "They're testing us, probing our defenses." Caleb whispered, voice tense, "They're trying to find weaknesses. If we react too soon, we could fall into their trap." Marcus nodded, formulating a plan in his head. "We'll bait them. Make them think we're scattered. Then we hit them when they're overextended." Tanya's brow furrowed. "And if we're wrong? If they've adapted too quickly?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. The truth was heavy on his chest. If they miscalculated, everyone in the warehouse could die. Instead, he checked his weapons and tightened the straps on his tactical vest. "We're human," he said finally. "That counts for something. Let's make it count." As the night deepened, the horde moved closer. Smaller, faster packs slipped through the side streets, avoiding the traps they had set earlier. But Marcus and his team were ready. Molotovs were lit, barricades reinforced, and every survivor assigned a defensive position. The first wave hit near the west entrance, and the battle erupted in bursts of fire and gunshots. The flickering flames from makeshift torches cast grotesque shadows as the undead crashed into barricades and each other. Tanya fought with brutal efficiency, swinging her crowbar with precision, knocking back any zombie that slipped through the defenses. Caleb's sniper rounds picked off threats from a distance, one shot at a time, while Marcus and a small strike team countered the ones that tried to flank them. Despite their preparation, a silent threat emerged from the shadows, zombies that had learned to avoid noise and fire, moving with eerie patience, striking from unexpected angles. One slipped past the barricade and lunged at Jordan, who barely managed to shove it back with a metal pipe. The encounter left him shaken, but he didn't falter. "We need to flush them out," Marcus yelled. Tanya, set off the fire traps on the south corridor. Caleb, cover the rooftops. Everyone else, drive them toward the inner courtyard. The plan worked with brutal efficiency. Fire and noise drove the small packs into the kill zone, where Marcus and his team picked them off systematically. But each victory came at a cost. Debris, fire, and exhaustion left the warehouse trembling under the strain. Finally, after what felt like hours, the streets fell silent again. The survivors regrouped in the courtyard, breathing heavily, battered but alive. Marcus scanned the area, every sense alert. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "They're adapting. Every night will be worse if we don't find a way to fight smarter, not just harder." Tanya wiped blood and sweat from her face. "Then we prepare. We can't let them outthink us." Jordan nodded, determination settling into his features. "We've survived this far. We can survive longer." Marcus looked at them, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take the fight to them. Tonight, we survive. Tomorrow, we strike back." Outside, the city lay shrouded in darkness, the faint groans of the remaining undead a haunting reminder. Ashwood's last human stronghold had held, but only just. The night was long, and the silent threat in the shadows promised that the next challenge would be deadlier than ever. Dawn broke over Ashwood, painting the ruined city in pale streaks of light. Marcus Hayes stood on the rooftop, rifle slung over his shoulder, scanning the streets for movement. The previous night had tested them all, and though the warehouse still stood, exhaustion was etched into every survivor's face. Yet, there was no time to rest. The horde was learning, adapting, and Marcus knew that if they stayed on the defensive, they would eventually be overrun. Today, they had to take the fight to the enemy. "Tanya, Caleb, Jordan, gather around," Marcus called, his voice carrying authority despite the weariness. The three of them met him in the inner courtyard, weapons ready and expressions grim. "We can't wait for them to come to us. We need intelligence. I want to know what we're dealing with, where the horde is gathering, and if there are any other threats. We strike at dawn, fast and smart." Tanya Alvarez nodded, adjusting her gloves. "Recon? That's risky. We could run into dozens at once." "I know," Marcus said. "But if we don't, tomorrow will be worse. Caleb, you cover us from the rooftops. Tanya and I go through the streets. Jordan, you stay and coordinate the others. If something goes wrong, get everyone inside and hold the line." Jordan swallowed, fear shadowing his face. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The plan was simple in theory: move through the streets, gather information, disrupt the horde, and return before being overwhelmed. In reality, every step they took was a gamble with death. The city outside the warehouse loomed like a battlefield frozen in decay. Cars were overturned, windows shattered, and the stench of rot hung thick in the morning air. Marcus led the way, flashlight scanning every shadow, every alley. Tanya followed closely, crowbar at the ready, her sharp eyes sweeping for any sign of movement. Caleb remained hidden on the rooftops, rifle trained on the streets, his steady breathing a lifeline for the team below. The first sign of the horde appeared almost immediately, a cluster of shambling figures moving cautiously near a collapsed bridge. Marcus motioned for Tanya to halt. "We observe, but don't engage unless necessary. We need patterns, not casualties." Through binoculars, he studied the creatures. Smaller packs moved with coordination, splitting and regrouping like soldiers under command. It was more than instinct. Someone, or something, was directing them even without the alpha. That realization made Marcus's stomach tighten. Suddenly, a scream shattered the silence. A survivor trapped in a nearby building was being dragged out by a horde pack. Tanya reacted instantly, swinging her crowbar, knocking one zombie away, but the others surged forward. Marcus fired, the sharp crack of his rifle echoing across the empty streets. Caleb's shots joined in from above, thinning the ranks of the attackers. The fight was brutal but brief. Tanya and Marcus dragged the survivor to safety, panting and trembling. "We can't stay here long," Marcus said. "This was only a taste. They're watching. They know we're here." Pushing further into the city, they discovered a horrifying scene, a central plaza filled with dozens of zombies forming a grotesque formation, as if waiting for orders. Among them were several creatures larger than the rest, moving with the same intelligence as the alpha. Marcus felt a chill. These weren't random mutations. They were evolving, becoming smarter, faster, and more dangerous. "We can't fight them all," Tanya said, voice tight. "Not without drawing the entire horde to us." "No," Marcus agreed. "We disrupt, gather intelligence, and get out. That's the mission. Anything more is suicide." Using a combination of fire, noise, and carefully timed gunfire, they created a diversion, forcing a small section of the horde to break formation. Caleb's sniper shots picked off the leaders as Marcus and Tanya observed patterns of movement, noting which streets were safe and which could be ambushed. Every detail was vital. They had to know their enemy before it knew them completely. By mid-morning, they retreated toward the warehouse, bruised but intact. Jordan coordinated the survivors inside, barricading doors and preparing for any counterattack. Marcus glanced back at the streets they had crossed. The horde was regrouping, larger than ever, and more coordinated. They had learned from the first strike. "This was just reconnaissance," Marcus said quietly as they re-entered the warehouse. "But it's clear, they're not mindless. They're planning, adapting. Tomorrow, the fight will be bigger. And we need to be ready." Tanya placed a hand on his shoulder, eyes filled with determination. "Then we strike smarter. And we survive, because there's no other choice." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility heavy on him. Outside, Ashwood simmered under the pale morning sun, a city of death and strategy, where every shadow could hide a nightmare. And in that knowledge, the last human stronghold prepared for a battle that would test courage, teamwork, and the very limits of human resilience. Night fell once again over Ashwood, but this time, it was different. The city no longer felt abandoned or silent, it felt alive with malevolence. Marcus Hayes and his team had barely returned from their reconnaissance mission, and the evidence of the horde's growing intelligence weighed heavily on them. From the rooftops, Caleb Johnson observed movement, dozens of small packs coordinating with uncanny precision. The Alpha's influence had not died, it had multiplied. Inside the warehouse, the survivors scrambled to fortify every possible entry point. Barricades were reinforced, fire traps were checked and relit, and the wounded were moved to the inner rooms for safety. Jordan Bell moved among them, distributing water and food, his hands shaking from exhaustion but his determination unbroken. "We can do this," he whispered to a young survivor clutching a teddy bear. "We have to." Marcus and Tanya Alvarez stood on the rooftop overlooking the surrounding streets. "They've adapted faster than we thought," Marcus said grimly. "Every attack, every diversion, they learned. Tonight, they're coming for the warehouse directly. And they won't be alone." Tanya tightened her grip on her crowbar. Then we give them hell. Every one of them. As darkness enveloped the city, the first wave of the horde appeared. Unlike previous attacks, they moved deliberately, testing the warehouse's defenses from multiple angles simultaneously. The quiet, deadly patience of these packs was terrifying. They didn't rush, didn't scream, didn't make mistakes. Each move seemed calculated, as if the horde itself had become a single, thinking organism. Marcus, Caleb, and Tanya sprang into action. Marcus fired from the rooftop, picking off zombies trying to scale the barricades. Caleb's sniper rounds cut through the more distant threats, while Tanya and the inner team fought hand-to-hand against any that slipped through. The warehouse shook under the relentless assault, wood splintering and glass shattering. Amid the chaos, Marcus spotted a terrifying sight: several new, enormous creatures leading smaller packs. Their movements were swift and precise, coordinating attacks and flanking the human defenders. The realization hit him like a blow: they weren't facing just a horde, they were facing evolution, and their enemy was learning faster than they could adapt. "Focus on the leaders," Marcus shouted over the roar of battle. "Take them down, and the rest will falter." Tanya charged toward a massive creature, her crowbar swinging in precise arcs. Marcus fired at another, striking the creature's head with a well-aimed bullet. Caleb continued to cover from above, picking off threats before they could reach the barricades. Despite their efforts, the horde continued to press forward, relentless and intelligent. In the chaos, a fire trap malfunctioned, causing part of the inner courtyard to ignite uncontrollably. Survivors screamed as flames spread, and Marcus realized that the siege was testing not only their physical strength but their ability to think under pressure. He barked orders, directing survivors to contain the fire while he and Tanya dealt with the advancing monsters. Jordan, tending the injured, was forced to make split-second decisions. He dragged one survivor from a collapsing wall, then another from the fire, moving with desperate precision. "Stay calm. Stay alive," he shouted, voice trembling but resolute. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of smoke, screams, and gunfire. Slowly, the survivors gained the upper hand, using the traps, barricades, and well-coordinated counterattacks to thin the horde. One by one, the massive creatures fell to precise shots or brute force, their smaller packs losing direction without their leaders. By the early morning, silence descended once more. The warehouse was battered and scorched, walls pockmarked by bullets and claw marks. Survivors were bruised, bloodied, and exhausted, but alive. Marcus lowered his rifle, chest heaving. "We survived, but just barely. They're learning. Next time, they'll be smarter, faster, and stronger." Tanya, leaning on her crowbar, looked out at the distant streets. "Then we adapt. We survive smarter, not just harder. We can't let them break us, not now, not ever." Marcus nodded, a grim determination settling over him. "We've held Ashwood's last human stronghold tonight. But the war isn't over. It's only getting worse. And when it comes again, we'll be ready." Outside, the city seemed deceptively quiet, a fragile calm between storms. The horde had retreated, for now, but the survivors knew better. Every shadow, every distant sound, was a warning: the next siege would be deadlier, and the fight for humanity's future was far from finished. The air was thick with smoke and ash as Marcus Hayes surveyed the shattered streets of Ashwood. The previous night's siege had left the city scarred and the survivors battered, but their resolve had hardened. They had survived horrors beyond imagination, but now, intelligence gleaned from reconnaissance and countless skirmishes had revealed a terrifying truth: the horde was regrouping for a full-scale assault on the warehouse, their last human stronghold. This time, there would be no probing attacks, no testing of defenses. Tonight, it would be all or nothing. Inside the warehouse, the survivors moved with quiet precision. Barricades had been reinforced, fire traps rechecked, and the wounded secured in the innermost rooms. Jordan Bell coordinated the inner defenses, his hands steady despite exhaustion. "We stick to the plan. Every position counts. We hold together, or we fall apart." Tanya Alvarez tightened her gloves, eyes sharp and alert. I've never been more ready for a fight. Caleb Johnson took his sniper perch on the rooftop once more, surveying the streets with surgical precision. They're coming. Big packs, moving fast, no hesitation. This is it. Marcus nodded, loading his rifle and checking the remaining ammunition. Then we remind them why humanity fights to survive. Tonight, every one of us matters. As dusk fell, the first sounds of the horde reached their ears, distant groans that quickly grew into an overwhelming chorus. Shadows shifted at the edges of the ruined city, moving in perfect unison. Among them were the massive, evolved creatures Marcus had spotted during reconnaissance, their glowing eyes scanning for weakness. The team's hearts pounded as the realization sank in: these were not mindless monsters. They were strategists, hunters, and tonight, they would test the last human stronghold like never before. The battle began suddenly. Smaller packs surged toward the warehouse's side streets, forcing Marcus and Tanya to repel them with a combination of gunfire and brute strength. Caleb's rifle barked from above, each shot finding its mark, thinning the waves before they could breach the barricades. But as always, some slipped through, testing the human defenses with ruthless precision. Inside, Jordan coordinated the wounded and remaining survivors, directing them to defensive positions while managing limited supplies. The warehouse shook under the force of impact as massive creatures collided with barricades, their monstrous strength threatening to break through. Flames erupted from carefully laid traps, forcing the horde into choke points where Marcus, Tanya, and the others could strike. Hours passed in a blur of chaos. Sweat, blood, and exhaustion mingled as each member of the team fought with determination born of desperation. They were pushed to their physical and mental limits, but their cohesion, every glance, every gesture, every shouted instruction, kept them alive. Marcus realized that while the horde had intelligence, it lacked something crucial: unity of purpose beyond instinct. Humans, despite fear, could choose to fight together, to protect one another, to survive. The turning point came when the largest of the evolved creatures breached a weakened barricade. Marcus, Tanya, and a small strike team confronted it in the central courtyard. The fight was brutal. Marcus dodged a crushing blow while Tanya struck from the side, and Caleb's sniper rounds, perfectly timed, struck the creature's vulnerable points. With a final, coordinated effort, they brought it down, the remaining horde faltering without its leader. Silence followed the final blow, broken only by the labored breathing of the survivors and the distant moans of scattered undead retreating. The warehouse, battered and scarred, still stood, a testament to human resilience and teamwork. Tanya wiped blood and sweat from her face. "We did it, we survived." Jordan, exhausted but standing, nodded. "We survived because we stuck together. Because we didn't give up." Marcus looked at the sunrise breaking over Ashwood, bathing the ruined city in gold and orange. "This city may be broken, but humanity isn't. We've fought, we've learned, and we've survived. As long as we stand together, we protect the future, our future." The survivors gathered, weary but alive, understanding that this victory was hard-won but meaningful. Ashwood's last human stronghold had endured the deadliest onslaught yet, proving that courage, teamwork, and determination could triumph over even the darkest odds. Outside, the horde's distant groans faded with the rising sun, a haunting reminder that the world had changed forever. Yet, within the warehouse walls, hope burned bright, a flame that no number of undead could extinguish. Humanity had won tonight, and with it, a chance to rebuild, to fight another day, and to protect the fragile promise of the future. Marcus raised his rifle to the sunrise, a symbol of vigilance and resolve. "We fight. We survive. We endure. Always." And for the first time in weeks, Ashwood's last human stronghold felt like a place worth defending, a beacon in a city of shadows, where bravery and teamwork had written the first chapter of humanity's continuing story.